This is Studio 809.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com. Links to everything there. I'm not going to bore you with all the descriptions. Just go to hikingbob.com. Today, we're talking to the director of the Colorado Springs Parks, Recreation, Cultural Services Department, Britt Haley, and we're going to talk about what you guys have done in 25. So, Britt, thank you for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. You always make it so enjoyable to do a podcast. And we had a great year. And then we also had some challenges this year, so it's really nice to get a chance to review that at the end of the year and see all of the good and talk about some of the bad.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say the last couple of years have been a little bit of a challenge. Probably this year more of a challenge than the previous year. Before we talk about the challenges, let's talk about the big accomplishments. What would you consider? You run this department, and it's more than just parks and trails. As we know, it is Pikes Peak, America's Mountain. It is the golf course. It's a cemetery. There's a lot of things beside the it's a sports complex. There's a lot of things here. What would you say are in a nutshell, some of the biggest accomplishments of your department over 2025?
Well, there are some memorable things that you can find that are physically tangible. We were able to rehabilitate not one, but two neighborhood park playgrounds. Well, actually, Rampart Park is a community park, and then Woodland Hills together. And because they were fairly close in proximity to each other, we got better pricing and were able to do two instead of one. So I feel very good about making our playgrounds safe and accessible and making sure that we're providing that service to the public. A big one that was we just finished doing the ribbon cutting for was Greyhawk Park. And I took that on as the new director with a lot of support from City Council. And we finished it this year under budget, if you can believe that. So I'm really excited that that is now a park for the community. On the intangible side, one thing I really wanted to do was update the economic benefits of park study, which is completed by an outside organization that has special expertise in measuring economic impact. And that is a group under the Trust for Public Lands organization, and they do this nationally. And they did it for the city of Colorado Springs back in 2016, and we updated it in 2025. And one of the findings didn't surprise us, although some people would be surprised to find that $90 million of economic value are generated in our park system. And we only looked at the City of Colorado Springs Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services facilities. So I feel really good about highlighting that at a time when economic benefit and value is an important topic. I also am really excited that we finished a waterline project in the Garden of the Gods that was able to install 9 different hydrants and do a circular loop that will one day allow us to provide additional amenities for our visitors. But it also is always a big undertaking when we're doing anything in Garden of the Gods, and so I'm really proud that we were able to finish that project. So that's a sprinkling of different things.
That's a good one. And that project in Garden of the Gods also improved, if I remember correctly, water supply to the neighborhood to the south of it. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so that just over the boundary line, their water pressure for their fire hydrants was not good. And so Colorado Springs Utilities was willing to share in the cost of this big project because it was 8,000 linear feet of water line that was redone, but it did allow that neighborhood to have so much better service and then, of course, response if needed for any fire events.
So there's another one of your intangibles, is that it assisted a neighborhood.
Yes.
With that. The economic benefit study said only looked at Colorado Springs, so you can take that number and probably increase it by, some factor when you account the county parks and state parks that are also directly adjacent to us.
Oh, yes. One of the findings from that report was that if you live within 500 feet of an open space, a trail, or a park, you get additional property valuation. Across our system within our city jurisdiction, it was $1.1 billion of additional value. So that factor is impactful. And it's anywhere from 9 to 12% on any home value based on that. So we know that that can apply outside of our boundaries, but in the city it was a pretty remarkable number.
Pretty insane.
Yeah.
Obviously, as in any year, and we touched on this a little bit about, the economics part of this. Some things don't happen. And sometimes it's because you just don't get to them, sometimes because money disappears. What were some things that may have been a disappointment in 25?
Well, it was probably the preparation of the 2026 budget, which was the hardest lift for our team. And just to let everyone know how that works, we start working on the next year's budget in about April of the year. So you think, oh, good, we just started 2025 with our new budget, and 4 months in, you're already looking forward to the next budget to get it through all of the approvals that a budget needs to go through. So we started out the year feeling pretty optimistic about 2026. Unfortunately, our city is very dependent, and the Parks Department is very dependent on sales tax revenues. And we saw that they just weren't coming in at a robust rate. They were coming in pretty flat. And of course, expenses were still rising, which meant that you've got a diminished capacity with every dollar that you spend. The other thing that was happening is that the Colorado Lottery Commission told us that we need to watch out for lower returns on the lottery dollars that we depend on. And those are called conservation trust funds. So those are distributed across our whole state based on a per capita basis. So sometimes we say, all right, well, sales tax isn't performing, but perhaps the lottery is doing better, and so we can buffer. This year, for 2026, we were projecting over $1 million drop in lottery funds, over $1 million drop in TOPS funds, which is the Trails, Open Space, and Parks sales tax, and then city general revenues also declining. So we had to think differently about how we did our budget. And the numbers were it was just hard to arrive at a final figure. So we were working on it right up to September, trying to really calibrate. And at the end of that conversation, unfortunately, the Parks Department needed to take a 12% cut. And where that ended up being most impactful or most identifiable is we'd gotten to the point where we couldn't cut anything more from parks maintenance and operations, and we had to turn to some of our recreational programming opportunities, and we had an underperforming community center at Meadows Park Community Center. Its director was retiring, and it turned out that we needed to make that be our cut. It was $750,000 worth of a reduction in that one spot. And I think there's a positive community conversation that's following what comes next. But it was really hard. And the other thing that we had to do is we had to lay off 9 employees, some of whom were very long-term employees, had served the city for over 30 years, and some of whom, and this was actually harder for me to have those discussions because I talked with almost every one of them, is employees that had just started with us. They were maybe 5 months in, looking forward to a Parks Department career, only to have the rug pulled out from under them. And it was just really hard, but necessary in order to balance our budget.
Hopefully the longer-term employees were able to maybe move into retirement. They've been there long enough, so hopefully retirement may have come a little sooner than anticipated for them, but hopefully they were able to move into retirement. But the new employees, that's pretty tough for that to happen.
Very true.
Yeah.
And my heart, goes out to them. You have two sides of every equation. One is that you have to do it in order to meet your budget, just like every family does around their dinner table. Right. But everyone is a human being with a career and a life, and I don't forget, speaking to any of those folks about the decision that we had to make.
Right. The community center closing was not met without some controversy, some public outcry. Obviously, nobody wants to see a facility in their neighborhood close or have something, regardless of what the economics may be behind it. It's still in their neighborhood. You mentioned there's been some positive discussion about that. What's happened since the initial announcement that it was closing? And there was a lot of negative press about it, but it was a decision you had to make. What's come around since that's happened?
Well, the mayor likes to use solutions teams to evaluate organizations or problems and solve them, and he's put together a pretty meaningful solutions team to look at this property and what its capacity is, to look at the programming and see if we have community partners who could take it up and help support it, and then other interested parties who want to join together to find a good solution and provide the same services but not through the Parks Department. And what I think that has done that is positive is, number one, it's elevated what our community centers do. A lot of people really don't understand exactly what they are. When you move in from another state, oftentimes you're used to rec centers, and rec centers might have a swimming pool, and they might have your yoga classes and your spin classes and a weight room and that kind of service. Our community centers are different in that they offer programs. Sometimes it's before and after school, basketball, or programming for kids, but it's also programming for seniors with meals provided for seniors on low incomes and crafts and things that people can do together as a community. So I think there was a lot of misunderstanding about what our community centers provide, and I feel like the understanding of our community centers has been elevated through the conversation. The other thing that was really healthy, I think, is that the community around Meadows Park really came together, and some new members of that community emerged as folks that wanted to have the conversation about what does their community need and how can we provide it. And I think we've got some potential new partners as well. So as hard as it was to not be able to continue to run Meadows Park Community Center, I feel that the community itself is going to speak to the future and find a really good solution.
There is a big difference between a community center and a recreation center.
Boy.
And it's easy if you don't delve into it, it's easy to misunderstand the difference between it. I think of one of the best public-private partnerships in a park is Philip Miller Park up in Castle Rock. The park costs more than the entire city, but your budget.
Twice my general fund budget.
Yeah, I mean it's
yeah.
But a lot of it was a lot of private funding, and they actually built this fantastic recreation center. That's not what we have here. We don't really have recreation centers here, and we mostly have community centers.
Right, and
there's a difference.
They are, and the other thing about our community centers is that they are focused in one part of the city, and the rest of the city doesn't have anything like that.
Right.
So a lot of people are unfamiliar with what they do because there's not one close to them.
True. And I don't want to get too much into going into the money part of things. That's always money's always a thing. Is the current administration, and I know you maybe can't speak for the mayor's office, is there more of a thing a method to look at more public-private partnerships to get more private funding? I go back to Miller Park up in Castle Rock. It's a city park, not even a county park or a state park, and it's huge, and it's got every amenity in the book, but it's still a free park unless you want to participate in some things. Is there any movement here in Colorado Springs to kind of move towards that kind of a model to maybe make funding a little more sustainable or a little more level, I guess, maybe for lack of a better word to put it?
Well, I think I can say with certainty that the mayor really supports public-private partnerships and has been very impressed with some of the ones that do help the Parks Department sustain its efforts. Our favorite one to talk about, of course, is the Garden of the Gods with the Garden of the Gods Visitors and Nature Center, which is private, and it brings in money, and then 70% of that money comes back to enhance the park. And so a lot of other states have reached out about that particular public-private partnership, but there are quite a few others in the system that really do work. And so I know that the mayor encourages those, and he likes to take a business outlook when he's looking at the various things that we do. And so I know that we've got some good community partners that we're in talks with right now about various properties across our system.
So we talked about the budget going forward next year. We took some hits. What is the average park visitor going to see different in 26 than they did in 25 in light of all the cuts that have happened? Are they going to see much of a difference? Are they going to notice things? I mean, last time there was a big cut back during the recession. It was obvious, and it was a huge cut, much bigger than what you're seeing now. And trash wasn't picked up, grass wasn't growing, lights were turned off. What would the average visitor see in 26 compared to 25 in light of these budget cuts?
Well, we're hoping that your average person won't notice much of a difference. And I say hoping, knowing that we are going to change the fertilization cycle for our park grass, our turf, to a less frequent routine. We are going to change our mowing schedule a little bit to save some money. So if you've been watching the grass grow very carefully, perhaps you might notice, but otherwise I don't think that there will be a big change. The variable that we can't be sure about is the level of vandalism. And so this past year, we had a pretty high level of vandalism in our parks, and we had enough money to respond and replace the equipment, essentially. And we do have money set aside next year in 2026 for those activities, but if it exceeds our budgetary levels, then you will probably see a sign up on a restroom facility that says closed due to vandalism, unless we can get a private partner to come in and help us with that. So I'm very much hopeful that we won't need additional funds in order to address that, but it's just one of those costs that you really have a hard time budgeting for.
Sure, you have no idea.
Yeah, we looked at changing our fountains and spray grounds cycles. We decided not to touch that. That will remain the same, so people can enjoy those features. And we'll just have to see how it all works out. Obviously, we won't be able to hire additional staff, and we won't have any big capital construction projects aside from some that were previously budgeted. Our trails will keep getting built because we do have the TOPS program with a lot of money in the trails category that still needs to be spent on the ground. So I feel good about the staff is still going to have plenty of projects to complete. We're working on the Black Canyon Quarry reclamation right now. And that, of course, will one day, we hope, be a great open space for gaining entry into Waldo Canyon. So I'm excited that we're going to have some time to work on some good projects that will provide future benefit. However, we won't be doing a lot of playground rehabilitations or any of those kind of work in 2026, as far as I know. And here's the thing. Sometimes you get a big surprise, and it's a good one, and money comes in for a specific project. So it could be that 2026 shows us more opportunity than the budget process itself would give us the hope for.
With grants and stuff like that.
Exactly.
You mentioned that the lottery, which affects the Conservation Trust Fund, was seeing a decline, which kind of surprised me because typically when there's an economic downturn, people turn to the lottery more, and actually lottery funds go up, which I'm kind of surprised that they're down a little bit. How is it going to affect things like the Great Outdoors Colorado GOCO grants, which are also lottery funded? What are you seeing with that? Is there less funding available in those grant cycles, or you think there's still going to be grant opportunities as plentiful as they've been? Because they've been really good. I mean, just the other day there was a news release that was it $25 million in grants that GOCO gave out to different groups and entities. A lot of money there. What do you think's going to happen with that?
Well, there are two things going on. It was early in the year in 2025 when we got that notification to be ready that maybe 2026 wouldn't have as strong a returns on the revenues. And of course, we didn't have the big jackpots that we are seeing right now anyway. And big jackpots do tend to drive more lottery sales. So it could be that those actually perform better than anticipated. With regard to Great Outdoors Colorado grants, we have not received any notification that there is an expected, less dollars expected. But I can tell you that the GOCO grant process has been refocused. And one of the areas of that focus is into regional partnership initiatives in order to bring other partners together. And the Pikes Peak Outdoor Recreation Alliance has been our regional partners organization that put together an Outdoor Pikes Peak initiative. And I'm happy to say that Becky Lineweber worked so hard on that project and was able to be one of the first regional partnerships to be ready to apply for grants at GOCO, and just announced they've received $2.5 million to support all of these outdoor recreation partnerships that are happening in these counties that are underneath that regional partnership. So I think those grants are going to continue to be available, but they may be more focused into priorities of GOCO.
Okay, cool. You kind of mentioned the TOPS program, which it's independent from the general fund, falls under your purview, but it is also sales tax. And we talked about how the city is heavily dependent on sales tax, far too much in my opinion, but that falls on deaf ears. How did it make out? You mentioned it about $1 million less, but overall, how is that program doing? It's immune from Tabor and things, so it can keep building money over year after year. Is it still pretty good shape?
Oh, the great thing about TOPS is that the revenues that come in, if they're not spent per the budget, they go right back into TOPS. They don't get swept into a bigger realm of city spending. And that makes me happy to tell our staff here, don't worry, you don't have to spend all of the money you can save for a special project. So we do have money built up for a special project, and particularly in the open space acquisition account. We were able to partner with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and the last meeting of City Council, which was just last week, there was the final approval of a major land acquisition to expand that state park, where the city is buying 128 acres of property, and then Colorado Parks and Wildlife is also buying property in order to really expand that state park, which has been a magnificent partnership over time. So TOPS in its open space capacity is very strong. Its trails category is very strong, where I would see that it's not able to do as much as we would like as in the parks category. And that's just because we have such an abundance of parks. We have such a large deferred maintenance backlog. And so we have to prioritize how we take care of the things that we have. And that has been one of my mantras as director, is I want to take care of what we have. And it really takes a lot of work in order to identify how to do that best. Okay. But TOPS has been one of the most successful ideas that citizens drove. It wasn't city government that sought it out. It was citizens that chose to run a ballot initiative in order to produce these beautiful places that we have here in Colorado Springs. And I think TOPS is outperforming itself, as it always does. It's still very flat revenue, just like the rest of sales tax. And you know what that's coming from is more of national level policy that is causing people to be conservative with their spending. And our economy is showing it, and that's just the facts of life.
Right. Things go in cycles.
They do.
Some years are better than others. We talked a little bit about the enterprises, Pikes Peak, Garden of the Gods. That's a public-private partnership. I shouldn't call that an enterprise. The golf courses, cemetery. They're independent, completely independent.
True.
They have to
don't get
fund
any
themselves.
Sales tax.
How did they do during the year? Especially, I'm curious about how Pikes Peak did. I mean, that is the big one.
It is a biggie.
The golf courses obviously do really well. I'm not a golfer, but I like going to some of the golf courses to have dinner or lunch or something like that.
Sure, there's so much more to do. You don't have to play golf.
And the views are usually pretty nice from there. So
Great.
How did the enterprises do during the year?
I haven't checked in with our golf courses, but from what I've seen, everything has been going very well for them. Of course, we just implemented some irrigation improvements that were made possible by ARPA dollars. And whenever you save that much water, it really helps with the revenues in the enterprise. Valley High got a new concessionaire, and that concessionaire made a lot of upgrades to the clubhouse, along with providing a great venue for food, and it's delicious. It's called Caddies, and so they're doing really well there. And then at Valley High, there is a public-private partnership, again, that is going to rehabilitate the pool house at Valley High, and that's called the First Tee Organization, which is a private 501c3. They've been doing youth golf programs at that site, and they've decided to go in really big at $1.2 million of investment into that facility. So I really feel like, Patty Jewett is just very solid on its business program, and Valley High is seeing a lot of new opportunities. So I'm grateful that both of those enterprises are doing really well. The cemetery enterprises are perking along, again, with some irrigation improvements as well, and some new opportunities in those enterprises, or that enterprise, I should say, with the two cemeteries. And then Pikes Peak, it's down in visitation, as you wouldn't be surprised to hear that, I'm thinking, but we have noticed that's anywhere from 8 to 10% down.
Okay.
In visitation. So that does hit home when we're running a lot of programs and other opportunities at the Summit Visitor Center. But there have been so many great partnerships as well on Pikes Peak that I'm really hopeful for its future as well.
And when I talked to Skylar Rorba, the manager of that, earlier in the year, he was talking a lot about expanding some of those opportunities. People think of the bottom and the top, and there's a lot of stuff to do in the middle, and I think he's expanded that. So hopefully in the coming years, I'm sure that stuff takes a while to all get done, especially when you're dealing with the federal government in the middle.
He's had some Federal Emergency Management Agency grants, and those are hard programs to complete because of the bureaucracy, but really great in terms of the additional assistance. He also has some lodgers and automobile rental tax grant funding to execute in a playground at the Midway campground. So I'm not sure. I think it's just a Midway stop.
Picnic area.
Picnic area, that's it. It's not a campground.
Not yet.
No.
I know he wants to do that too.
But he has a vision for many things that would really enhance the time that people spend in that beautiful space. And Crystal Reservoir, I just have to say that Colorado Springs Utilities has been such a great partner. And they've worked really well with us to envision additional recreation opportunities that could be enhanced. So we're looking forward to all of those things.
Cool. Looking forward to 2026. And we talked about how the visitor experience to parks, how that's going to be affected by the budget. But overall, what can people in the city and the community expect to see from the Parks Department going into 2026? Are any big projects they can see? I know some things are in the works, so those are probably going to happen, things that are funded already, grants and whatever. But what can we expect to see anything big coming from the department in 26?
Well, one thing I want to make sure that I do mention is that we spent so much time and effort to achieve a status of the highest professionalism in our profession, which is reaccreditation through the National Commission on Park and Recreation Agencies. And that process really assures that we are constantly improving all across the department. And we were able to receive that review and reaccreditation this year in 2025.
Awesome.
Which it is awesome. And it was a ton of work, but it also made us make sure that everything that we have is at the highest level of professionalism. In fact, the employee that ran that process, who was the person in charge, was named by our department as the Employee of the Year. Her name is Stephanie Adams. And Stephanie Adams was selected out of 3,000 city employees. She was selected as the City Employee of the Year all across the system, not just for this, but also because of her work with data and making sure that we are using data to inform our decisions. She does a lot of community engagement, which I think is really important for the people who love our parks, open spaces, and trails and community centers and want to have a voice. And so all of those things that we've done in 2025 then go on to inform 2026. I have to say that we're looking forward in 2026 to some transition of leadership. I am retiring after 29 years in public service, and so there is a national search underway right now for a new director of this incredible department. It's in good hands right now because it is under an acting director. My final day will be on December 31st. And then Kim King, who has been with the department for 25 years, will be able to transition us through to the selection of a new director. So that is something to look forward to in terms of the fresh leadership in the department. And this department and the parklands that it has within its inventory is unlike any other in the country. And reaccreditation says, that you're in the top 3% of all the parks departments that are eligible to apply for it in terms of everything that you do. But it doesn't take into account the fact that you have Garden of the Gods and Red Rock Canyon Open Space and the Pioneers Museum and the Archaeology Program and the 13 gold standard site designations with Leave No Trace organization and all of those really impressive accomplishments that our system can uniquely achieve because we have what other cities don't have, which are these incredible outdoor spaces.
So let's talk about that. You're retiring at the end of the year. I would not be overstating it that it came as a surprise to a lot of people. It came as a surprise to me that you were retiring. But, I didn't know that you had 29 years already in the 29 years. Am I right?
That's right, yeah.
29 years in the system already, not necessarily in Colorado Springs and not necessarily in the Parks Department, but that's 29 years. I mean, so that is a career, no matter how you parse it. Let's talk about your history here at the Parks Department. You didn't start out here, like we mentioned. How did you end up in the Parks Department? You're an attorney. You were originally at the city attorney's office. How did you end up in the Parks Department?
Well, I had the pleasure of being the corporate division chief in the city attorney's office, which meant every city department was underneath our role to provide legal advice and support so the airport was one of our clients, and the fire department, and also the Parks Department. Naturally, I gravitated toward the Parks Department in that role, and even prior to that as a senior attorney in the city attorney's office, because prior to that I had worked for the State Board of Land Commissioners in the state's Department of Natural Resources. I love water law. I love land acquisition. All of those real estate transactions that we do are just the kinds of things that I find to be fascinating and also enriching. So, as the Parks Department's attorney, I helped with all of the different legal issues that can hit the department. And when the position became open for the TOPS program manager and design and development manager, I couldn't help but want to be in this department. It is rewarding to be an attorney. You win litigation, you're happy for one day because you have this win, but then you move on and there's nothing that you can tangibly see that you've done. But when a playground gets rehabilitated and you happen to go back to that spot and kids are giggling and rolling around on the ground and just having the best time, that feels very impactful.
And then you gravitated towards your current position as a director.
Yes, I mean, that was a little bit of a different choice in that our prior director resigned. I was asked to be acting director by Mayor Suthers, and I was willing to do that. And as I considered it more when the opening was available for the permanent position, I was encouraged by others to apply, and I finally told myself that either you don't apply and you live with that decision and have no regrets, but if you think you might have a regret, you better apply. And I knew I would regret it, and I really looked deep into my heart. But I also knew that it's the kind of job that requires every moment of your existence. And so I set aside a lot of things in my life in order to help make sure that this department was successful. And one of those things was my family's efforts at showing dogs competitively. I'm the person that runs them around the ring. And it's a skill to do that that I've developed since I was 7 years old. So all of these dogs are now kind of set aside, and the family is starting to get a little bit tired of either trying to hire a professional or not being able to compete. So it's time for me to look for that to come back into my life and to turn over this magnificent department to new leadership.
Sure. What would be, it was interesting, you mentioned Mayor Southers. I ran into him when that whole selection process, and I was talking to him someplace, not that my opinion made any difference to him. I said, Britt would probably be pretty good in that position.
Well, thank you for whatever that may have helped me.
I can't say what he was thinking, and he probably doesn't remember that conversation at all. But my best,
I bet he does. I bet he does.
My best guess is he probably was happy to hear somebody affirming a decision he may have already been in the process of making. But
well, I feel like he really did involve a lot of community members, because people like you have come to me afterwards and said, "Yeah, I spoke with Mayor Southers and gave him advice," or "I reviewed the video interviews," or "I was part of X, Y, or Z." So I know that they reached out extensively. What one thing would you be most proud of in your time in the PRCS, either as a director or? It's hard to pick one, because there are some that were such struggles that to have them successfully complete is something I'm proud of. So I'll name a couple things.
Sure.
One that I came into that was a significant challenge was the Pioneers Museum needed a new HVAC system. And I was acting director at the time, and we did not have enough money to make that happen. And we were trying to find any way to do it, because it was actively dripping inside this historic building that houses our most treasured community history. And you have to deal with it, or you will lose just cultural resources that can't be replaced.
That museum is like the National Archives for Colorado Springs.
You're right.
Yeah.
There are letters penned from our city founders that are in there. And so it's not a choice to not do it. And yet we didn't have the funds. And so one day, Mayor Southers, being nice, he asked me, "How's it going, Britt?" And I just blurted out, "Everything's going fine, except I do not know how I'm going to find money for the HVAC system." And he came to the rescue, because he just loves history. And he said, "We will find a way to fund that," and by golly, he did. But then the new stress came in that now you're putting in an HVAC system into a 125-year-old building, and you don't know what's in there.
Right.
And so I was nervous the whole time, but we had such a great project manager in Jake Butterfield, and a really good contractor team in Saunders Norwood, and my goodness, it happened. And now that museum not only is comfortable to be in for visitors, but more importantly, it takes care of the right humidity levels and temperature levels for our artifacts. And so I am very proud of that accomplishment, even though you wouldn't think that an HVAC system would necessarily rise to the top.
I completely understand it. I mean, it makes sense that it's a 125-year-old stone building for the most part. Beautiful building, but you're trying to put in a 21st century amenity in a 18th century, a 19th century building. That's not an easy thing to do.
It was just high pressure.
Get it right, yeah.
High pressure, high responsibility.
Cool.
But it really did work out. And the other thing I just learned, because we're going into 2026 with a new park system master plan being developed through community input. And I learned that since the last one, which was in 2014, the city has expanded its open space network by over 30%. I think they said 33%. I'm trying to remember.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that between Chris Lieber as the former TOPS program manager and myself as the next one, and then Lana Thielen, the existing TOPS program manager, that has been a significant addition of what I think makes our city the most special, which is open space, conservation, and opportunities for people to not only appreciate the outdoors, but also to recreate and all the benefits that come from that. So I'm really proud of that. I know that it's perpetual stewardship that follows, that is our responsibility, but I can't think of a better use for our tax dollars than to do that.
Absolutely. I was here for the 2014 master plan project. It was a huge undertaking. I forget how old the master plan was before that one. I think it was very old, if my memory serves. So it was an old master plan, and it was time for a new one. And I'm glad you didn't wait 30 years for the next one. Like I said, if I remember correctly, the 2014 master plan, if you took the physical footprint of the park system, it would fit into and be completely surrounded by the current park system. If I'm wording that correctly, the current park system is a whole lot bigger than what the 2014 master plan. So there's a lot of parks out there that are not part of the master plan.
So true. Our city has grown. Yeah. Our open space system has grown. And the opportunities to pick up these gems have happened. Right. And so, we didn't have the luxury of waiting longer because we'd outgrown the prior park system master plan as a city, as a trail system, as an open space system. So it really is time.
Are there any things that you wish you could have done differently or had gone differently during your tenure?
I came in really hoping that the general fund could provide more support to the department, as it did back in the 2008, the 2000s. And my big idea was, let's take all of the funded positions that are in our special funds, such as the TOPS sales tax and the Conservation Trust Fund. Let's take them out and put them in general fund where they belong so that those funds can do what their original intent is. Conservation Trust Funds before 2008, those used to fund capital projects. Those would be able to repair a leaky pool or to build a new park. Same with TOPS. The TOPS program, the parks category, used to build neighborhood parks. And in 2010, when the department was cut by more than 2/3, in order to even save the basic functions of the department, necessarily the decision was made to put employees into those special funds. But I wanted to get ourselves on a project where we could slowly extract them a couple at a time. We didn't have to kill the general fund, but I wanted to be able to have our general fund component really pull its weight in that regard, and it just wasn't possible because the budget and revenues didn't support it.
And to be fair to you, the general fund is up to the elected officials how they want to parse that out. So you could make your pitch to them along with Public Works, police, fire, IT, whomever else, and argue that everybody wants a bigger slice of fund that is not very big and
largely spoken for.
And volatile. I mean, that with it being sales tax based, it's so volatile that it's hard for everybody to get what they want out of. And if you're an elected official up there and you're trying to make these decisions, and everybody from every corner is yelling at you about it, both either the employees, the staff, the managers of the various departments, and then the community. I want my park, I want my police station, I want my fire station, I want my road fixed, I want my something fixed. I'm not taking them off the hook for it, but it obviously is. Their job's not easy either.
They all worked in good faith to come to the best conclusion possible. I really believe that. And I'll just make the pitch that prior to 2008, we were about 8.3% of the overall general fund of the city, and the Parks Department has now dropped to 4.3. So all of our other departments have helped us out significantly with other projects, and so I can't say that it's a direct comparison. It isn't. But just a little additional support when the timing is more appropriate, I think, is best if we want to see projects move forward, if we want to take care of the things that we have. We're hearing from the community that they want certain things. As we go through this 2026 Park System Master Plan. And I think there's got to be a recognition that in order to provide an equitable park system for everyone, that the funding has to be there to take care of it as well. So we'll keep at it. Maybe in my private sector life, I can be an advocate for those kinds of things.
There you go. We kind of talked about stuff that you wished had gone differently. Was there anything that you wanted to accomplish but just didn't get to?
Well, really, it was the trying to fine-tune the budget so that it produced those things. I think that I wanted to position a number of projects for success, with the economic benefits of park study being one of those things. And we wanted to get the top sales and use tax extended, and we were able to do that. So many of the things that I really hoped for on the dream team list of things did in fact happen, and it's because of the people in this department working extra hard in order to make that possible. So I really don't have any regrets about efforts that I wanted to tackle but didn't get to. I feel like some of those will still be in line. It's just going to take a little bit longer time. The one thing from 2025 that I really wish that we could have done is that we'd put together a fund in order to repair leaks at Wilson Ranch Pool. And during the budget process, as we needed to give more cuts to the department, we had to give up the money we'd saved for the pool on the general fund side of the equation. So we still have some funding for Wilson Ranch. And it's still leaking. And, if you're a water conservation person like I am, you don't ever want that to be the case. We need to fix that pool.
And the pool in my neighborhood. I'll make a pitch for the pool in my neighborhood, which is a whole different ball of wax.
Had a much more catastrophic issue with that pool, of course, being over, kind of a subsiding land due to mining. But but Portal Park deserves the attention that I think it's getting. And so the good thing about Portal Park, Flanagan Park, and Danville Park is that they're all under not only additional review, but the public is helping to support those parks. And so I think we're going to get something good happening at each of those. But boy, it would be great if I had a magic wand and I could just reopen that pool, reopen the Memorial Park Municipal, and fix up Wilson Ranch.
Yeah. Pools are difficult. Obviously, there's the staffing. You can't, if you have a pool and you've got to have lifeguards and that kind of stuff, so staffing is an issue. And when you have a pool, like in my neighborhood in Portal Park, built over a mine shaft, so every couple of years it sinks and then starts leaking. And
that's a problem.
You can't just keep pouring, for lack of a better metaphor, pouring good money after bad to keep patching it. The problem is there's nothing underneath of it, so you've got to fix that whole issue.
Well, and they're notorious, like across the park system, across the nation, aquatic facilities with all the pumps and the requirements are finicky structures that need a lot of money.
Right, a lot of maintenance.
Yeah.
There's a nationwide search going on for your replacement. We talked a little bit about that. Maybe somebody from within, maybe somebody from without, who knows? I have no idea how that's going. But when a new director is selected, if you had the opportunity to give them a word of advice, what would it be?
Well, I think number one, they have a magnificent team of staff who are ready to help and do know their business and will be able to keep things going, because it's always going to be a learning curve. It doesn't matter how strong a background you have. There's going to be something in this department you've never encountered before. So if you came from the golf course industry and you know all about turf and water conservation and managing golf courses, that is helpful, really helpful. But you're going to have community centers and youth sports programming and sports complexes and open space and trails and Pikes Peak that maybe won't be your strength. Perhaps you come from the natural resources world and wildlife conservation and biology, and all of those things are very normal operations, but you've never had a therapeutic recreation programming opportunity. Well, that's going to be the case, so don't sweat it. Just learn from the staff. It's going to be okay. Everybody will support each other. And that's one of the best things about the department is that you look out across all of the employees of this department, and they were all drawn to it. It's not that they're here because they can't find any better job. It's because they selected the Parks Department. They were the top candidates. They were chosen to be here, and they do an excellent job.
Great. Well, Britt, anything else you'd like to say to us before we go?
Well, I do want to say thank you to all of the community members who have volunteered their time, whether by serving on the TOPS working committee, the Parks Advisory Board, the Westside Community Centers Advisory Working Committee, or all the volunteer projects, our friends of various places. All of that community effort makes sure that this park system keeps operating the way that our community hopes for it to operate. And it makes it special because everybody lends their unique expertise and their special touch. So I do want to end our final podcast thanking anyone who has helped with anything in the park system, because it really is meaningful.
It is an interesting community that rallies behind the Parks Department. And I have a hard time thinking of any candidate for your job who would have any experience with as diverse as this park system your department is. I mean, how many people are going to have a park at 14,000 feet? Let's just start with that. Let's start with that big mountain looking over us right now. Excuse me. How many are going to have nobody's done that.
How many have run 2 cemeteries?
Yeah. And a couple of golf courses and the parks. I mean, a lot of times those things are parsed out to different departments in bigger cities. They have a recreation department and they have a parks department, and they're not always part of the same thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But, well, Britt, thank you so much again for doing a podcast with me. It's been a great pleasure to work with you over the years on various things when you were in TOPS and then moved up to the director's position. I can't say enough about how inspiring it's been to work with you and how much I learned from you. You usually had to calm down and shut up. And I know that there were times when I probably tested your patience a little bit, but you were gracious enough to not get too upset with me when I push things a little, but
you always offered to help.
Well, I
sometimes by hurting people.
I hope not.
No, you said you knew Jersey charm.
Well, yeah,
which I took as you would go to those lengths to help the Parks Department succeed, but you also kind of held us to a standard of listening to the community and making sure that we weren't stuck in our government ways. And so it's a balance, and it's hard to learn how to accept balance sometimes, and you helped us with that.
Well, I appreciated that you, when I pushed sometimes back a little bit and said we need more community input, that you were like, yeah, we probably should do that, instead of, and I don't want to say this necessarily for this city, but in other places that I've known about, that they would say, no, we're done listening to people. I mean, eventually you got to a point where you've heard everything. But when I pushed and said we need to hear more from people, you were like, okay, let's hear more from people, and always gave that opportunity. So that was the biggest thing I got, that listening to the people was the most valuable thing that this department, or any department, any city government can do, is to just make sure that people are heard. They may not always get what they want. That's not how it works, but you can at least feel good that people heard your thoughts and wanted to go forward. So that was my takeaway from my many, many years working with you, and I appreciated that. Sorry to see you go. Like I told you earlier, I did not approve. I also was not consulted, so it's none of my business. But we have to do what we have to do. I mean, I left